All right, so we have a special guest. I didn't even know you were coming today. A good friend of mine, Women in Poker Hall of Fame member, and in day 2 of a big event over at the World Series. Most of those things are true. How about a nice round of applause for Maria Ho?
Hey guys, thank you for having me. So I was asked to speak today just to talk a little bit more about the player experience, but specifically, a female poker player. Now, I've been playing professionally for 17 years, and I think, I'm sure Linda and Jan and other women out there can also say the same when I say that experience has not changed very much for women in general. Obviously, for me, I think that what I've seen is maybe just more women advocating for themselves or kind of understanding that their place at the table is equal to the man sitting next to them. But I feel like if we're talking about how tournament directors or the people running the tournament and the staff can perhaps help us create a better and more welcoming environment for women, then I think it just has to do with feeling like when we speak up that we're being heard. Obviously, people like to use the word allies a lot lately, whether it is in support of, a political statement or, something personal. But even at the poker table, we need allies, right? I think a lot of the times, especially in the early days of my poker career, I was afraid to speak up because I wasn't sure if calling the floor would end up, resulting in something that would benefit me. I thought maybe if I called the floor and if the floor somehow didn't take my side, then now I would be just sitting there at this table for the rest of the day for another 10 hours in this really awkward situation where I called the floor over and maybe this person who was harassing me or who called me a name doesn't face any type of repercussions for their behavior, and then that just creates a very awkward situation for me for the rest of the tournament. So in the beginning, I didn't really speak up, but I also didn't really know what my options were. I see a lot of women at the poker table who don't even realize that calling the floor is an option. I think it's important to make sure that women understand what the rules are within a tournament, what the rules of engagement are, what their options can be if they should face a situation like that. I understand that there's only so many of you guys, and you guys are not going to be able to see or hear everything that's happening. So in a way, I think the dealers are the first line of defense. So obviously, dealer training is so hugely important. But again, I also see that some dealers are not incentivized to call the floor over voluntarily without without being prompted by somebody at the table, specifically because, again, it could create an awkward situation for them. Some of these dealers, if we're not talking about tournaments, if we're talking about cash games specifically, they rely on tips, and they never want to end up alienating a player, even if they are on bad behavior, because that could affect their own financial situation. So, I mean, there's just a lot of different things that I think about when I think about, sitting down. I feel like I have to sit down and be prepared for anything. I have to expect the unexpected, not just in the poker sense, but any day I could end up facing kind of an uncomfortable situation. But luckily, I've chosen to return day in and day out and play this game for a living. But there's plenty of women who are just doing this for fun, that are doing this for recreation and for the social aspect. And so it's so important to create something enjoyable and an atmosphere that they're wanting to come back, because a lot of the times people come and play poker, they end up losing. So, you want them to have a good experience regardless of whether they win or lose. And that's how they keep coming back. So I don't know if there's anything specific that any of you guys wanted me to address, but, as I mentioned, for me, that player experience as a woman hasn't really changed very much in the time that I've been in the industry. And, I've luckily had really good experiences with Matt and with Justin and, with Paul and with a lot of the tournament directors in here that I have seen them, be willing to obviously stand up for the person who's at the table that feels like they are put in an uncomfortable situation. And I'm not even speaking about women in that regard. I'm talking about all players. For recreational players, for amateur players, certainly they're not immune to being perhaps treated in a negative way, sometimes by pros themselves. So, I mean, I understand that the community, the people at the tables, is definitely a part of the problem, but we would really like the help of a mediator and an intermediary, because, you know, at the end of the day, if there's repercussions for bad behavior, you know, that's a huge deterrent. People want to come and play these tournaments. There's a lot of money to be won. There's a lot of upside for these players, but there needs to be some stricter policies in place for when they act out. And, you know, I think like we have to really think about enforcing more rules in poker, because so many things can kind of be loosey-goosey, or, you know, you might know that player because they've come to your card room for the last 20 years, and so you might give them some type of preferential treatment. But at the end of the day, I think the biggest deterrent is people knowing that there's consequences for their behavior.
I'd like to give an example of what Maria was saying. I played in a tournament recently, and on the TV screens, they had UFC fighting. And all the guys at my table are watching that and break his leg cheering. And it's like, women don't want to be in that atmosphere. I didn't want to be there. I'm there because I'm there to get the money. But recreational players will not come back.
Yeah, I think as organizers as well, we need to take more accurate actions versus any form of negative behavior or language toward any gender comments, any racial comments. Like, I think we need to punish those players way harder and just not let them get away with a warning, because the next time when they go to another poker room, they might just make again the same comments. And we should be more strict so we can create an environment in a poker room that everybody feels welcome.
One thing we do on the cruises is when we have our dealer meeting, we tell them, you know, if you see a situation brewing, but it's not to the extent yet that you need to call the floor, we ask them before they push to go over and let the floor know that something's going on at that table, so that they can kind of keep an eye on it.
I don't know how large the women field is here in America, but in South America, women are about 5% of total players. So if we're not really treating or catering the needs of women in tournaments as well as we should, with zero tolerance policy for any any behavior that is wrong, we are actually missing half of the potential clients we might have and half of the potential revenue we might have. So it's really, really important also for an operator not only to treat the players well, but also to make sure that everybody is safe and in a recreational environment.
One thing to add, I haven't played a lot in the last couple of years. I spent a year living on a beach in Spain, so that's why the long hair and all the rest of it. I became a beach bum for a year. But one thing that I saw even previously, or didn't see rather, that's gotten a little lost that I think can also help is when I first started as a dealer and when I was training dealers and stuff, you're supposed to tell the dealer who pushes in what's happened at that table, even if it's something as awful as, hey, seat 3's an asshole and he's been warned, you know. But I never see that anymore. The dealer's in a hurry to get on break or to get through the push. I never see someone say, hey, seat 2's been warned not to do X, or seat 4's been, or seat 2 and seat 4 will not shut up and it's been complained about by people at the table. I just never see that information flow anymore. So to what Linda and Maria have been talking about is like, if there was a problem at 6:30 to 7 for that dealer, the dealer at 9 o'clock doesn't know, and yet that person has had to deal with, the player has now had to deal with that issue 2 or 3 times, and it's just not being communicated along. So, yeah, a little closer, sorry. It's not being communicated along, and I think that's something that it feels like has gotten lost in dealer training, is that it's your job to pass along what's happened at that table to the next dealer. Because I think, to Maria's point, the dealers are the ones that, they're the ones who are going to see it. It shouldn't be on the women to have to complain. To be fair, the other 8 players at the table or 7 players at the table should also be saying something, but sadly we don't seem to have gotten to that point yet. But the dealers are the ones who are going to see it, so it has to go into that training somehow.
It could also be important to train your dealers to, even when they get pushed from the table, to go, instead of going to the next table, first go to the floor, explain the situation, what's all been happening, and then the floor can take care of it. It's always difficult for the dealer to take care of a situation at a table because the dealer is sitting there, he has to still continue doing his job, while a floor, it's easier for them, like he can take the players or the player apart and explain him the situation and eventually give some penalties or consequences to whatever behavior he has done.
Well, here's the deal. We've been saying for years that women are the untapped market, and in 2 years from now, we're probably still going to say that. So it'd be nice if you could have a ladies' night once a month, maybe. Ladies-only tournaments. When I first started playing, I was like, we don't need them. Well, I'll tell you why we do need them, because I was playing in the WSOP tournament the other day. Actually, it was 3 years ago, but because we were at the Rio. So on our break, Jan and I are walking out, and we see two guys in a fight. We see one guy peeing against the wall, and we looked at each other and we said, this is why we need ladies tournaments, because they need to get the experience first of that. It can be fun, and then, maybe later on they'll go into the open events. But, I just wish there was some way to bring more women in. Part of the problem is that women are not taught to call the floor, because I do get a lot of emails from ladies saying, this guy called me this and this one. I said, do you call the floor? And it's always no. So they don't know they can do that. Maybe if you have some women in your room, you can take one of them to lunch and just say, what's your experience? I think that's a really good way to handle it. Take a couple of them to lunch and say, tell me what's happening.
There's something else I want to add to that, is because I think there's this myth that, women just aren't interested in poker, or like maybe the game or the strategy doesn't appeal to them, and that's just patently false. I mean, I just recently sat down with Playtika, the people that run the WSOP app, the free-to-play app, and they tell me that it's almost 40% women that are playing on their app, and a lot of apps have similar demographic information that's available. So I think what it comes down to is, why do women like to play online but not play live? And it has to come down to the player experience for them. And so I think, let's stop perpetuating this idea that women just are simply not interested, because that's not true. And, to Linda's point about places that don't have ladies events, I have my own feelings on whether or not we need ladies events at the highest levels, but in terms of the local card room and in terms of people that are just primarily coming to play for a recreational experience, those absolutely help. There's so many women that I speak to, anecdotally on a daily basis, that tell me the WSOP ladies event is the first ladies event and first tournament that they've ever played, and the reason they chose to come and play that is because they feel like they can expect a nice atmosphere. And so that definitely factors into people's decision making in terms of when they want to make that first step into a card room environment, when they want to play their very first tournament. And so I think it's so important that we have the gateway drug to speak for, people to enter into the open events, is for them to have a ladies tournament or a ladies night where, having your friends there and being able to get a group of girls together to go is nice. I have a friend that never played poker before, and early on in my career, I just invited her to come play with me, and she didn't know anything about the game. And I put her in, and she had such a good time. So maybe there's even some type of, if you bring a lady with you, you guys get, rake free or something, and some type of incentive where people are introducing their friends to come, but also it's nice to know that your friend's right there. It gave me so much comfort. Anytime I would sit down in a tournament and just a friendly face, somebody I knew was there, because I felt a little bit safer. I felt like if something happened to me and maybe I was too afraid to speak up, that at least I knew that somebody was there that would perhaps also speak on my behalf.
I agree with I agree with everything that Maria said, obviously, but I agree with two things that Linda said. One, we will be having this conversation 2 years from now again. Sadly, we've had it. This is the fourth or fifth summit where we've had this type of discussion. But there also is we had a ladies event at every EPT for 9 seasons in a row, I think, €200. And we had a group of women from like 9 different countries who came together. They came for 2 days. They played that event. They had fun, and they went in. They were never coming to my event if that event didn't exist, or they were never coming to my festival if that event didn't exist. We created that over the course of a number of years to have this great atmosphere of 60, 80, 100 women who would come and play these events. And I know I'm relearning the U.S. market, but here there's There's Poker Power, there's LIPS, there's Poker League of Nations. There's a number of organizations that have kind of looked at this. So from your room's perspective, if you're going, well, so how do I do this? What would I want to do? There's a number of women's groups out there who would absolutely partner with you to do something. We're looking at doing some stuff down later this year where we're going to partner with some of those groups as well. And so I think, ladies' night, having a women's tournament once a month, something like that, that should be very easy for an operator to do. And it's not even like flipping the operator hat on. It's not that intensive. It's not like saying, oh, I'm going to do a $100 no limit this weekend and I'm going to be overwhelmed. We know you're not going to be overwhelmed because you're going to have to build it. It's going to be 6 tables or 8 tables. So it's not really that big of an inconvenience to a room either to create that atmosphere. It's well worth it. Like we had a wonderful group of people who followed us around for 5 or 6 years all over Europe just to play a $200 event.
I just want to say from a dealer point of view, 100% agree with what Maria said. But again, with the tips thing in America, you're going to get a lot of dealers who are going to be scared shitless not to say anything. Coming off the table, yeah, say it to the TDs, brilliant. But again, you got the stigma of I can't say anything, it's going to hurt me in the pocket. What I will say is dealing a women-only event is absolutely brilliant because there is no bitching, there is no moaning, everyone's having a great time, no one's acting out of turn. It's a great environment and these should be more encouraged. But why can you get 500-600 women in a women-only event, but when it comes to an open event, there's hardly any women want to play, and it needs to be nipped in the bud. And as you say, the dealers have to have it enforced, that they're not going to get penalised. And if it's when they get up from the table and they go over to the TD and it takes like a minute before they have to push, then so be it. But it needs to be encouraged from a dealer point of view that they're not going to get in trouble for saying anything, they're not going to get in trouble for speaking up.
So the last TDA summit talked about this as well, and I have talked to a couple of poker room directors about a little idea that I called it Zen Poker, and it's a little subset room inside a room as a testing ground to see if you can attract women. If anybody's interested in hearing about that to see if they want to test it in their room, I do have a loose design for it, so just figured I'd mention it.
I think, I want to say, I don't know, I thought for a long time if I should say this out loud, but I think as a community, especially here, mostly TDs, and I think we need to be more punishing to abusive characters in the poker. And I want to name a name. His name is Phil Hellmuth. I think we're enablers. If anyone don't do anything about Phil Hellmuth, we're all enablers, and by extension, we commit the crime too. So, and I don't think he's specifically abusive to women. That's, I don't know, probably the silver lining. But no, people like him need to be, I don't know, whatever you want to do to them.
All right. One thing, give him a chair. Maybe we add some verbiage into player responsibilities, like we have in there. Obviously, we're supposed to speak up if there's a mistake, right? If you see a mistake being made, you're supposed to speak up. Maybe we say that. If should be already not have to be written, right? That you should speak up if somebody is insulting or being offensive. But if it's in there as speak up if you see a mistake or verbal badgering or whatever the case may be, just like and then also maybe adding the verbiage of, you're supposed to call a clock when time's warranted, or, feel free to call the floor if you I'm saying adding those things to player responsibilities might be something that at least gets that part in the right direction. The other part of the ladies event, something we started doing at the Gardens Casino too, is we had like newbies, ladies, and friends tournaments. So it's more of an environment for the ladies to play in, and it's a ladies tournament designed to get new players and ladies, but California law, you can't just have a ladies tournament. It's actually against the law in California to have a ladies tournament. So a way around that is to call it a ladies, newbies, and friends tournament. So we want ladies to play. Obviously, it's targeted towards ladies, and for them to bring a friend and people that are new and kind of flip that script so men can play in it, but if majority of the people at the table, if there's 6 women at the table and only 2 men, that flips the script. And it creates that environment, I think. And then it gets them more comfortable to actually play with men when they're usually 2 women at a table, or 1 maybe, in the rest. So that's something that we've done. And because we've seen ladies only tournaments for, since Lips and all of that, and it's not necessarily, the numbers don't grow. Right, so we know that's not. It's a good thing to have them still, but that's not the answer to get more. Right, so, but anyways.
I know because Toby sent it to me yesterday. Stars added a rule just to clarify something like this. It's for their rules. It's rule number 8. It says the right to a peaceful game. All players are entitled to play the game in a peaceful environment without being badgered by other players. Because we've all seen not just Maria's examples of women being, but obviously we have some characters out there who are obnoxiously loud and make the game unpleasant for other people. But that's something they wanted explicitly adjusted in their rules. Yeah, it's basically they wanted that absolutely spelled out, that if you're being obnoxious, we have the right to do something, and all of the misogyny and stuff like that would fall under that absolutely.
Thank you all that spoke on that. Thank you, Justin, for your Poker Atlas. And again, the Poker Atlas is out there if you guys like to see it. You go and check it out. He'll be here, I think, for the next 2 days. All right, so I hope you all had a good lunch, and I hope you were able to talk about random card theory.